Hello, and welcome to our next episode in our Scope 3 and Focus series here from the Egypt Energy Show, Egypt's 2024. I'm delighted to be joined for this episode by Hesham Yehia, Sustainability Director at Fertiglobe, and Carsten Sonne-Schmidt, Partner at Digital Energy. Thank you both for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, Hesham, I want to start with you. How do you see Fertiglobe's role as a Scope 3 supplier in the high emission industries such as agriculture or transportation?
Thanks, Julian. I think this is a very good question to start with, because the people mainly, they disconnect between Scope 1, 2, and 3. And it's very important to understand that our Scope 1 and 2 is the Scope 3 of others. And by decarbonizing our Scope 1 and 2 is helping others also to decarbonize their Scope 3. And I think we have good examples within Fertiglobe on doing that. So we have a well-established sustainability strategy, and as far as we are now talking about the GHG reduction, so we have a well-established GHG reduction strategy. We had made our carbon footprinting as a start to understand where are we from others, and then we have identified initiatives to reduce our Scope 1 and 2. We have identified 3 main buckets, especially for Scope 1. The first one is the operational excellence. We named that as operational excellence, where it mainly touched on the energy efficiency programs for our plants and the asset reliability. And by doing that, we have succeeded to reduce a considerable part of our Scope 1 emissions. The second one is for Scope 2. We have succeeded over the last 2 years to ground our Scope 2 emissions to zero in our assets in the UAE and in Egypt. And thirdly, and most importantly, is the low carbon ammonia growth projects. And I'm talking here about the low carbon /blue and the renewable ammonia. And we have 2 good examples to answer your specific question. The first one with ADNOC in the UAE, we have succeeded to ship low carbon ammonia product to Japan, Korea, and Germany for the power generation. And in Egypt, we were the first to export the first renewable ISCC Plus certified ammonia to Unilever, actually to use it in the soda ash production and reduce their Scope 3 as well.
That's really good. And Carsten, I want to bring you in here. Now, how does capital-intensive supply chain companies tackle their role in bringing down carbon intensity?
Thank you, Julian, for that question. I think Hesham made some good points. First and foremost, it's important to make a category of where are your emissions, both in Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3. Because a Scope 1 for a supply chain company will be someone else's Scope 3. So making efforts in that, categorizing it, and then prioritizing. But then it's also very important to work with the clients. So if you are a steel provider or an equipment provider, then work with the client and ensure that those specifications that has probably been there for decades can still be met, but met in a sustainable way. That there is some sort of collaboration around making sure that price, time, and quality is also met. But collaboration, working with the clients as a Scope 3 supply chain provider or supply chain company is crucial. And then, of course, also working towards circularity. So if you provide equipment, then also help the companies you supply to, give them options for how you can take that equipment back and revamp it and go into the circularity in that aspect.
Yeah, very interesting. And Hesham, what has been the most challenging part of Fertiglobe's sustainability journey so far?
Yeah, I think I'll focus again on our GHG reduction, and that mainly for the low carbon ammonia strategy and development. I see 3 main challenging things. The first is the technological development. Still, there's a huge risk. Also, it's a cost disadvantage, because currently the renewable ammonia or the low carbon ammonia comes at a higher cost than expected. So that's one. The second is the regulatory framework updates. And I think certain regions we have seen now, like the USA, they are applying the IRA, which is looking into the supply side. Others are looking mainly into the regulatory side in terms of like the CBAM and these things. But I think it has to be both the carrots and the sticks together. We have to see the regulatory support pushing and allowing a demand pull, because without a demand pull, we cannot decarbonize at a scale. The third thing, and most importantly also, is the lack of cross-border coordination for the certification and the standards. And I see that this hinders scaling up of the hydrogen economy. Also, it also puts some liability or some burden on decarbonizing your scope 1 and 2.
Brilliant, Hesham. And Carsten, what do you see how industrial supply chains are struggling with their efforts to reduce emissions?
They struggle on many fronts. The first challenge would always be to measure and get up a baseline of that measurement and make sure that you can benchmark that with other companies. You can use that for prioritization, look at what initiatives to take. I think most companies have started on that journey, and some, like Fertiglobe, have been through that journey and come out with that with some priorities and a program. Where I think the challenge will be going forward is accountability. So when we're talking about Scope 3 and we are talking about a supply chain, then there will always be discussions on who's actually in control of that supply chain. If the client demands certain products at a certain time and with a certain frequency, the supplier might be in a position where the answer will be we don't have control. So it becomes more complex when you have to manage the intensity across a supply chain. So that goes back to collaboration, accountability and collaboration, and then making sure that everyone in the supply chain is rewarded for the best initiatives. And that requires a different way of measuring and doing carbon credits than what we have today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a new way forwards. And on that point, where, Hesham, is Fertiglobe as an organization in identifying its own Scope 3 emissions?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I started with Scope 1 and 2, and now the focus is on our Scope 3. I think we are doing an inventory currently, and we will publish that in our sustainability report of 2023. We have went through, as I was speaking with person before the interview, we have went through the 15 categories of Scope 3. We have identified the two major categories where the Scope 3 is the biggest. In our business, in our fertilizer business, it is the use of the product at the farmland. So we came up with initiatives to reduce the use of the product, the emissions that are coming from the use of the product at the farmland, like doing a stabilized fertilizer, which tremendously reduce the GHG emissions at the farmland.
Really interesting to hear that, Hesham, and good to see you're identifying stock taking. And on Scope 3 emissions, Carsten, what or are there good industry examples out there of tools that can look at tackling Scope 3 emissions?
There are several different approaches and tools. Hesham just gave a brilliant example of how they very structured go through their inventory, Scope 1, Scope 2, and now Scope 3, and measure where they have the biggest impact and then what they can do to reduce. And then in terms of the tools, everything from alternative fuels, look at your process using digital solutions. We have a long list of good examples from different industries where artificial intelligence, machine learning has helped optimize processes and reduce inefficiencies. And when we talk about sustainability, inefficiency is emissions. And that's an easy way to at least start the journey. But nothing stands alone in the journey to net zero. Everything counts. So it's about using all the tools and then figuring out in what sequence and what makes sense at what time.
Absolutely, Carsten. And just before we go, we're at the start of 2024, Hesham. what's the year looking like for Fertiglobe? I know there's some big announcements and, I would assume a busy year ahead.
Yeah, it is a busy year, I think. And I think if we look into our internal structure, we have projects that we are looking into FIDing it this year. It relates to the low carbon ammonia productions that we have earlier mentioned. We have also a project for the stabilized fertilizers that we are also FIDing this year.
Brilliant, Hesham. That's really interesting to hear, and all the best for the rest of the year.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
I just want to thank yourself and Carsten for joining me in Cairo at the Egypt Energy Show.
Thank you, Carsten.
Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll bring you more episodes in the series in the future.